Alrighty guys, how's it going? This is take 3 of part 1 of a 2-part series of videos I'm making. I apologize in advance if you hear any rain. It is raining right now. And I'm just sitting here in the charger. I wanted to make a video series explaining my 5-speed transmission swap that I did here in the charger. Again, like I said, this is my third attempt already at making part 1 because I keep screwing up and it's just garbage. So here we go again. I already made part 2 to this yesterday, and it's pretty long. It's over 28 minutes. And I do repeat myself a lot. I tend to notice. So I hope you guys will watch it still, though, make it all the way through, because I do show the swap itself, and there's still a lot of good information to be had from that video, part 2. So I hope you guys can just bear with me with the annoyances of me repeating myself and just taking forever to get to the friggin' point of everything I talk about and make it to the very end. Because, like I said, I do show the swap, and there's a lot of good information to still be had in part 2. But I'm redoing part 1. This is just going to be giving the background on the swap, where I got the transmission and everything. It's going to be relatively short. So, yeah, let's go ahead and begin. So, this transmission, now, this charger was originally a 318 2-barrel coupled with a 904 3-speed. You can still see the automatic gear selector indicator right there on the steering column, as well as the automatic gear shifter. I decided to keep those here, the selector and the indicator. I decided after all not to remove it because for some reason, I don't know why, don't ask me, but I find it a little amusing when I take this car anywhere and someone looks through the window and they see this and then they see that and they just get confused. I don't know why, but I find it amusing. So it's happened a couple times already, and yeah, don't ask, but I decided to keep it. Just keep it here. But yeah, 904 3-speed. My dream car has always been a Charger, preferably a 69 model year, of course, with a 4-speed manual. Well, since I'm a young dude in his mid-20s, here I am with a 72 Charger and a 5-speed transmission. But I wanted a Charger with a manual so badly, and I was willing to do anything and find any way to make that happen for the least amount of money possible. Dirt cheap. And I found a way. And now originally I did want a 4-speed in this car. But upon doing research, the only place I could really find the 4-speeds was, for me at least where I'm located, the only place I could find them was online. And even units, 833 units that were completely trash and needed rebuilding even, were still too expensive and way out of my budget. So I did more research, and I found my only other option really was to grab a 5-speed transmission out of a Dodge Dakota, late 90s Dodge Dakota. Now, essentially, this is a Jeep transmission. This transmission itself is an AX15. I know I mentioned that in previous videos. It is an AX15 transmission from a 2-wheel drive Dodge Dakota. And if you guys want to make the same swap in your old Mopar passenger cars, you will need the 2-wheel drive AX15 from a 2-wheel drive Dakota. You can't grab them out of a 4-wheel drive Jeep because the output shafts on those AX15s and the Jeeps are shorter. They have a shorter output shaft because they're designed to made up to a transfer case, of course. Now, I don't know if there's any 2-wheel drive Jeeps that had AX15s. If there are, then maybe they will work. I don't know. But as far as I know, you need a AX15 from a 2-wheel drive Dakota. Okay, so that's what I did. I grabbed this from a 2-wheel drive Dodge Dakota at my local junkyard. And I wasn't lucky enough to find this transmission, or I wasn't lucky enough to find a Dakota with a V6 in it. The only Dakota that I found that even had this transmission in it was a 4-banger Dakota. So this AX15 actually had a 4-banger bell housing in front of it. And so I had to ditch that, and I had to get the V6 bell housing online. Cost me an extra $230. I think I overpaid for it, but nonetheless, I got one, and I was good to go. Had this thing bolted up behind my 318, and then when I swapped in my 5.9 Magnum, same thing, you know, I bolted right up to it. This transmission will mate, again, to any small block Mopar V8, 318, 340, 360, and the Magnum 5.2 and 5.9 motors. So, and probably in even the V6s if you choose to go with those, but I don't know why you would. So, but yeah, this will mate up to any Mopar small block as long as you have the Dakota V6 bell housing. All right, so that's where I grabbed this transmission from, and it was dirt cheap. I paid like $143, I think, plus the core charge and everything, including the core charge, I mean, and everything. $143 out the door for this transmission. Now, I didn't do a darn thing to this transmission when I brought it home. I didn't rebuild it. I didn't even clean it off or anything. I just freaking literally brought it home, you know, waited for the proper bell housing to get here, and I bolted that on, and then I just dropped the 904 and slapped this sucker up underneath and bolted it to my 318. That's all I did. So, and the clutch hydraulics I'm using are all stock components for a 1998 Dodge Dakota. That includes the clutch master cylinder and the slave cylinder. I did originally use the hard nylon clutch line. I think it was from a Ram, actually. I just shortened it up to make it work for the car. But now I'm running a 3AN steel braided hose that connects from the clutch master cylinder to the slave cylinder, and it works a lot better for me. The biggest obstacle right off the bat you're gonna have to deal with is the shifter. From thinking back right now to my experience overall when I did this swap, the shifter was the biggest obstacle, because I couldn't use a Dakota shifter because that was actually gone off the transmission the day I went to grab it from the Dakota. Someone took the shifter. So I took a shifter from a Jeep that had an AX15, and it bolted right on. But that shifter didn't work either. So my solution was to home make my own shifter. I just made this shifter and welded it to the existing base, and it works. I can't remember if in part 2 I explained how I made the shifter. I may have, but in case I haven't, I'll just go over it again real quick here. So you guys are gonna have to find your own solution when it comes to the shifter. Okay, right off the bat. My solution again was to make my own. I always wanted the Hurst pistol grip, but of course those are expensive, and I thought it would be a waste of money to spend all of that money on a Hurst pistol grip and then just goober it all up on the bottom when I went to just to weld it onto the existing base, because there's really no other way to connect it to this existing base that I have. You can't really bolt it on or anything. You have to weld it. So you guys are gonna have to find your own solution for that. But I made this shifter. The shifter itself is made from a from a 3/8 inch thick steel plate that I bought from a local metal supply. If the rectangular steel plate is facing this way horizontally, the dimensions would be about 4 inches wide and about 14 inches long. And I drew up a cardboard template of this shifter, measured it out precisely and everything with the angles and everything, so that when I shift forward it wouldn't hit the dash, because that was a problem that was prone to happening since this transmission shifter mount tends to be further forward than the A833s and whatnot, or any of the aftermarket 5-speeds that you find online. The higher end 5-speeds, as I call them. The shifter mount for this is further forward on the AX15, so it was going to hit the dash and the forward gears, and then with the bottom gears, it was hitting the bench. So I drew up a cardboard template and got it perfect, and then I transferred that template onto the steel plate, and I just took an angle grinder and cut it out. Okay, and then I just found some cheap plywood on the side of my house and cut those out, and then held it together with a bolt that I made, that I drilled a hole through in the middle and had a bolt and a nut. Held it together. It looks okay, but still kind of ugly. This is actually rust that's starting to already develop on the metal itself. I clear coated the shifter, but I don't know, it wore down, I guess, and a little bit of rust or whatever that is started to develop. It's ugly, but it works, and it's a pistol grip knockoff that I made for $4. That's all it cost me to make this, so it's awesome, and it's comfortable for all the obstacles I face with the shifter mount far forward and everything. You know, it doesn't hit the dash and it doesn't hit the bench, so it works awesome. But that's the main obstacle of this whole swap that you guys will have to deal with, is making your own shifter or dealing with the shifter. Everything else literally is cakewalk. But in part 2, I explain the pedal setup. I explain the clutch hydraulics, and I show you the clutch hydraulics. I show you the back bracketry for the clutch pedal support bracket, which is underneath, and all that stuff. I show you everything in part 2. This, I just wanted to tell you where I got the shifter from, what vehicle to get it from, and all that kind of stuff, and what the drivetrain was originally in this Charger. This Charger was originally a 904 automatic, 3-speed. So that's all I wanted to cover in this video. One last thing, however, before I sign off on part 1, that I forgot to include in part 2 while showing the swap, because I showed everything in part 2 as far as how to do the swap. Everything except for one important detail, of course. And that's the second main obstacle that you'll have to deal with when making the swap. That is the transmission crossmember. Now, a lot of guys, when they do these swaps, they'll fabricate their own crossmember. And maybe for a lot of you, fabricating one may not be a big deal. For those of you who do find fabricating a complete crossmember from scratch is a big deal, at the time, I thought it was a big deal too, so let me explain right now what I did for that. That's the only part that I left out from part 2 in actually showing you guys the swap, was the transmission crossmember. What I did was I reused the 904 3-speed auto crossmember for this AX15. All I did to that crossmember was I took an angle grinder and I basically cut out the whole middle section of the 904 crossmember. I just gutted it out until it was nothing but the flat sheet metal part in the middle. And after that, what I did was I took an 8-inch thick piece of rectangular steel, mild steel, and I welded it to that flat sheet metal part that I told you in the middle of the crossmember. It was to reinforce it, because when you gut out the midsection of the 904 crossmember, the sheet metal, like I said on the bottom, is thin. So I reinforced that sheet metal in the middle with a rectangular 8-inch thick piece of plate steel. And I just welded it there in the middle. I could get out and show you underneath. It's raining right now, but perhaps I can show you real quick. But plus there's a lot of kids outside, and if you hear them, I apologize. But that's what I did. I took a piece of rectangular plate steel, reinforced the midsection part of the 904 crossmember after gutting out the midsection of it. And then I drilled 2 holes through that rectangular steel plate. And I had, right then and there, I had the foundation for the crossmember. It was good to go. For the transmission mount itself, I used, now this is the part that sucks. I don't have a part number. I didn't keep the part number on hand or anything at the time when I bought the transmission mount that I ended up using. It took a lot of research as well to find out what mount that I had to use that would work. But I think it was a Jeep transmission mount, I think. It's basically just a rectangular biscuit type rubber mount with 2 studs that protrude out from it. And they're not closely spaced together. The studs are actually about 3.5 inches apart or so. But it's a rectangular biscuit mount with 2 studs coming out from the bottom. And where those 2 studs came out from the bottom, I drilled 2 holes for that rectangular plate steel for those studs to go through. And I just used a washer and a nut on each stud to bolt it up. It's really simple, actually. I apologize for not having the frickin' part number for that mount, but I believe it was a Jeep transmission mount. Basically, what you can do is you can go to your auto parts store. I went to Napa, and they have a parts catalog with engine mounts, transmission mounts. They just let me. They gave me the guy at the counter gave me his part catalog, and I just gandered through it page by page through all the transmission mounts until I found one that I visually thought would work. And I just said, okay, this one looks like it'll work. Let me buy it. And I just bought it. And it ended up working perfect. So, yeah. So that was the last thing that I left out from part 2. That was the one only thing I left out, was a Crossmember. It would probably be a lot more prudent just to fabricate a custom Crossmember from scratch. But in the event that you don't have the means to do that, and I know I still don't really, I just reuse the 904 mount, or the 904 Crossmember. I made it work, you know. I didn't have to fabricate a whole new Crossmember from scratch. So, you know, that's what you got to do sometimes if you don't have the means to fabricate stuff from the ground up. You just make the existing stuff work. And I was able to make the 904 Crossmember work with the AX15. I just had to gut out the middle section, reinforce it with a rectangular steel plate, drill a couple holes, and then found a Jeep transmission mount that was a rectangular biscuit style that had 2 studs coming down from underneath. And just, yeah, so really simple. But oh hell, you know what, I know this video is 17 minutes long. Let me just get underneath the frickin' car real quick and show you, okay? Since I think the kids are gone, let me just show you real quick. Okay. Excuse the wet puddles there. That's power steering and a little bit of oil that the car leaks. I don't know if I'll be able to show you this very well, and the lighting's not that great, but let's see. Can you see that? No, that's not. There it is. Okay, the lighting sucks, but anyway, this is the 904 Crossmember still. And this is that rectangular piece of steel that I told you about that you could probably barely see it, but I just welded it to the midsection of the 904 Crossmember. I welded it here on the side, all along the back, and then on the other side. I didn't weld it from the front. I just welded it down each side and then down to the back. It's just a rectangular piece of plate steel, about 3.5 inches wide and about, I don't know, 8 inches, 8.5 inches long. But you see these 2 studs I'm talking about. These studs are a part of that biscuit mount that I told you about. Drill 2 holes, and I guess they are closer together, aren't they? I said they were further apart. I guess I was wrong. Couldn't remember. But anyway, drill a couple holes through this plate steel after you weld it onto the Crossmember, and then they'll come straight down, and you just put a washer and a nut, and then that's your transmission mount, and it works perfectly fine. But as you can, it's too dark. You can't see, but anyway, it's too dark under here. Sorry, it's cloudy today. But this is the 904 3-speed Crossmember still, the original Crossmember. I just gutted the middle of it out, reinforced the sheet metal with this rectangular steel plate, and drilled a couple holes, and that was it. And I used a Jeep biscuit style transmission mount. That's all it is, guys. Okay, so I hope you were able to comprehend that somewhat, and you have a good idea of what I'm talking about for the mount itself and what I do with the Crossmember. Really simple, but this is what you want to do if you don't want to fabricate a whole new Crossmember from scratch, if you want to reuse the 904 Crossmember. Okay? That's what I did anyway. And it works perfectly fine. No issues whatsoever. Alrighty? So, that'll conclude it for part 1, guys. I said this was going to be short, but it's almost 20 minutes long. I apologize. But stick around for part 2. Watch part 2, please, because that's where I go into full detail about the transmission swap. And I show you everything. The pedals, the hydraulics, and all that stuff. Alright? So, Stick around, guys. Stay tuned for part 2, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.